The Redskins are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock. All right, team is now off the clock. Adam Schefter, can you tell us about their newest player?
A tackling machine, he finished the season just as strong as he started it, recording double-digit tackles and wreaking havoc upon a helpless offense. This performance cemented his position as the #1 linebacker in the draft and even had expert Todd McShay believing he deserved to be considered as the top overall defender in the draft, position agnostic. The biggest question for him now is, can he continue putting up gaudy tackle numbers in the NFL? His new team certainly hopes so.
The Packers made their selection. For more about him, let's go to Adam Schefter.
A veritable interception machine, he holds his college's single-game record for interceptions in a game, snagging 3. Scouts pointed to an almost sixth sense when the ball was in the air, and Matt Miller had him ranked as the top defensive back in the draft in his final mock. True lockdown defensive backs are few and far between, and this is a pick that should solidify this team's pass defense for years to come. It'll be very interesting to see if opposing offenses go right after him and how if he shows any rust after being avoided for much of his final year in college.
The Colts are now on the clock. The Colts pick is in. Adam, give us the rundown.
If you watch his college tape, you'd think he's purely a runner and a pass blocker. But what he showed at the Combine was an ability to also be a factor in the passing game. Matt Miller reported he ran through the entire route tree, looking sharp in each of his cuts. He did a great job hauling in most of the passes thrown to him, showing great body control and reliable hands. The team likes his dual threat capability, and I'm sure they're happy to have gotten him with this pick.
The Falcons are now on the clock. The Raiders are now on the clock. Let's go to Adam Schefter now with more to say about Randall.
Here's a guy who had been sliding under the radar on several teams' draft boards, even after several big games this year, and completely outrunning some high-ranking peers head-to-head. GMs still weren't sure what type of impact he can make at the next level. One thing is for sure, he's a hard worker who thrives on competition, which should lead to a very long and successful career in the NFL.
The Lions are now on the clock. The Bills are now on the clock. The Jaguars are now on the clock. The Titans are now on the clock. Adam, what can you tell us about the Titans' newest player?
I heard he surprised several scouts at his pro day when he showed up looking a lot leaner, and the difference showed when he went through drills. He turned in slightly faster times than expected in every major drill and displayed improved footwork compared to how he looked at the tail end of the season. I've heard from a few different coaches that they'd like to see him put some weight back on, yet keep playing as quick as he currently is. Whether he does that or not, I think we'll see him on the line on Sundays.
The Cardinals are now on the clock. All right, now that the pick's in, let's go to Adam. Adam, what can you tell us about this guy?
He's a Heisman-winning defender. Let me say that one more time. He won the Heisman, and he's a defensive player. Need I say more? You can imagine how well he played this season to win the biggest award in college over several offensive playmakers. The trophy was well-deserved, and according to Matt Miller, he projects really well as a defender in the NFL. I think this is a home run pick, and it's great to see a defender get some well-deserved recognition.
The Rams are now on the clock. The Cowboys are now on the clock. The Vikings are now on the clock. Vikings have just made Fuller their guy. Let's go to Adam for more.
He's a raw athlete with a lot of upside, and the question will be, where and when does he hit his ceiling? He's still relatively new to football, as he was a track and field runner for the school his first 3 years of eligibility. He definitely has the body to play any of the skill positions in football, and he may ultimately end up playing a different position than what he's drafted as. I'm sure the coaches will love the athleticism he brings, but first they'll probably try him out at a few different areas before finding his best role.
The Jets are now on the clock. The 49ers are now on the clock. The Seahawks are now on the clock. The Ravens are now on the clock. The Saints are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock. The Panthers pick is in. Adam, did Cam Newton get some help?
Matt Miller was glued to the ongoing soap opera that was his story this season. A feared pass rusher, he couldn't quite seem to play with the same intensity on a week-to-week basis. Some weeks he looked absolutely unstoppable, terrorizing opposing quarterbacks. Others he looked out of place, struggling to make any sort of impact, even taking himself out of the game multiple times in fits of frustration. Some GMs I spoke to felt that his lack of consistency was due to a lack of maturity, something that can be easily addressed by the right coaching staff. This pick could have tremendous upside or could end up as a what could have been story. It should be interesting to see how this saga plays out.
Broncos have just made Austin their newest player.
Matt Miller told me to look at a certain stat in regards to this defensive back, and that's average number of targets in a game. Not surprisingly, you see that number start to fall each week. He was a master of the bait and switch early in the year, on track to break records midway through the season. Eventually, quarterbacks gave up altogether trying to throw the ball in his direction, essentially taking away a receiver on every play. There's going to be an adjustment period now that he's in the NFL, but he certainly has the potential to be a shutdown defender for this team in the future.
The Dolphins are now on the clock. Let's go to Adam Schefter now, who's got more to say about the Dolphins' latest pick.
A tremendous physical talent, his draft stock plummeted after a well-documented battle with costly drops during a series of meaningful games this season. Sources have told me that when he's actually catching the ball, he's one of the most formidable before catching the ball. Draft experts feel he has tremendous upside, helping GMs to overlook any issues he may have securing the football. Whether or not he can cut down on the drops and become the superstar wide receiver that this team believes he can be should be one of the more interesting storylines coming out of this year's draft.
The Packers are now on the clock.
Well, wait, looks like both war rooms are feverishly back on the phones. I think that means a trade is coming.
The Chiefs are now on the clock. The Redskins are now on the clock. The Colts are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock.
I see both teams filling out cards. You know what that means? We've got a trade.
The Chargers are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a trade.
The Packers are now on the clock.
Hold on now. This pick is trading teams.
So they've just picked up Paul. What's the latest on him, Adam?
He was credited with having one of the biggest plays in college football this season. Late in the game, he picked off the quarterback and ran the entire field to score the game-winning touchdown. He did everything a coach would want to see, from baiting the quarterback to reading the downfield blocks. He flashed enough playmaking ability in that game and the remainder of the season to draw a lot of interest this offseason. This team has to be pretty happy with this pick.
The Vikings are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock.
How come nobody's at the podium? That's because both teams are right now working on a trade.
The Buccaneers have made their selection. What can we tell you about him? That's why we have Adam Schefter.
His final season in school came to an end early when he was dismissed from the team after missing several practices. I wasn't able to find out why he couldn't attend the practices, but I do know that after his third absence, the coach finally decided to bench him. He was on his way to having a decent year, but without him participating in practice, the coaches thought he would be a liability in the game plan going forward. After apologizing to his former teammates, I can see why this team is taking a chance on him. He seems recommitted, but we'll see if that's true come training camp.
The Cardinals are now on the clock.
Myers the choice. Adam, was it the right one?
Following a relatively quiet last season in school, he came into off-season workouts and was mediocre in every appearance, but promised to show improvement at his pro day. However, he was unable to follow through and again looked average across the board. Matt Miller tells me that besides the lackluster offseason, he's a tight end with no major weak areas, and the team could use a dependable player at the tight end position. I think he'll work out fine for them.
The Packers are now on the clock. The Broncos are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. Pick's been made. Let's go to Adam Schefter to hear more about the player.
His draft stock took a hit at his pro day when he failed to look natural in any of the drop back and ball reaction drills. As Matt Miller put it looked like the sun was in his eyes every time he turned around to look for the ball. Sometimes the receiver would break to the right, but he would go to the left too many times. Think with enough coaching, he can sharpen his ability to play in single coverage. We'll see if he becomes a starter at some point down the line for this team.
The Bills are now on the clock.
Eagles have made their selection. For more about him, let's go to Adam Schefter.
I've been told by a number of scouts that he has all the qualities you want to see in any NFL defensive back, and they usually follow that by referencing his pro day. The kid was a blur on the field, running just under a 4.5 in the 40. When it came to drills, he didn't disappoint either. His combination of speed, footwork, fluid hips, and pure instinct made a lot of scouts draw comparisons to a few shutdown corners currently in the NFL. That's a pretty flattering compliment. Now that he's been drafted, it's only a matter of time before we see if that comparison is an accurate one.
The Packers are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock.
Well, if you're wondering what the delay is, I think we've got a trade coming here.
The Jaguars have made their pick. Adam, what can you tell us about him?
In what could be seen as a controversial pick, here's a player who has been followed by quite the reputation as a wild child during his years in college. Numerous social media outlets followed and shared his off-field collegiate exploits, submarining his draft stock. Even with his party boy perception, many of my sources told me that this was simply a case of boys will be boys and not the foreshadowing of a larger issue. Look for this coaching staff to keep him extremely busy, hoping to avoid any unwanted publicity. This task may be easier said than done, especially given all the potential off-field distractions that come with being in the NFL. He has the potential to be his own worst enemy, and should he be unable to focus on the opportunity ahead of him, this pick could end up being one of the biggest busts of the draft.
The Panthers are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock. The Chargers are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock. The Cardinals are now on the clock.
Our very own Adam Schefter has more to say about this pick.
A fundamentally sound offensive lineman whose last collegiate season was ended prematurely by a nasty ankle injury, he's a guy who has the potential to become a centerpiece on the line for years to come. If there's one point of contention about him, it's that after talking to several of my sources, there's a significant worry about the strength of his surgically repaired right ankle. The original injury happened when the ankle appeared to buckle while he was not engaged, raising some serious questions about leg strength. He's been known as a bit of a power lifter with exceptional upper body strength, leading some strength coaches to openly question if this explosive lifting is putting additional stress on his leg joints. He looked good at the combine with excellent lateral movement pushing off the ankle.